Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. We suck dick today.
Oh fuck! Can't say that.
It's a pretty good layout, no?
I think so.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. An estimated 8 million people took to the streets of cities across 50 U.S. states and more than a dozen countries around the world Saturday in thousands of protests against President Trump under the banner No Kings. Organizers say it was the largest single day of protest in U.S. history.
Why is this so
In St.
low,
Paul,
bro?
Minnesota, about 200,000 protesters gathered at the state capitol just miles from where federal immigration agents killed Renee Good and Alex Preti in January. After headlines will air speeches from the St. Paul rally, you'll hear from Joan Baez and Bruce Springsteen, Ilhan Omar, and others. And we go to the streets of New York. Throughout the 5 boroughs. The U.S.-Israeli war on Iran has entered its 5th week. President Trump told the Financial Times Sunday he would prefer, quote, to take the oil and seize Iran's oil export hub, Kharg Island. Shortly after his comments, the price of oil surged to $116 a barrel. Separately, President Trump spoke to reporters aboard Air Force One and boasted about regime change in Iran.
But we've had regime change, if you look already, because one regime was decimated, destroyed, they're all dead. The next regime is mostly dead. And the third regime, we're dealing with different people than anybody's dealt with before. It's a whole different group of people.
President Trump's comments come as 3,500 U.S. troops began arriving in the region Friday. The Washington Post reported Saturday night the Pentagon's preparing for weeks of potential ground conflict in Iran. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal is reporting President Trump's considering a military operation to seize nearly 1,000 pounds of uranium from Iran. This is Ibrahim Zulfikari, the spokesperson for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
In response to Trump's recent threats of ground operations or occupation of any part of Iranian territory, which of course is nothing more than a wish, we announced that the warriors of Islam have been waiting for such actions for a long time to prove that aggression and occupation will not result in anything other than humiliating captivity and dismemberment and disappearance of the aggressors.
CENTCOM says more than 300 U.S. troops have been wounded in the Iran war. So far, 13 U.S. service members have died. According to a consortium of human rights groups in Iran, nearly 1,500 Iranian civilians, some say more than 2,000, have been killed. At least 217 children have been killed in the U.S. and Israeli strikes. U.S. officials say Iran fired 6 ballistic missiles and 29 drones at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, wounding at least 15 U.S. service members Friday. The Iranian strike also destroyed the U.S. military's E-3 Sentry radar aircraft, the first time the $300 million plane has been lost in combat. On Saturday, Yemen's Houthi rebels fired a barrage of missiles at southern Israel for the first time since the war began, targeting what the group called sensitive Israeli military sites. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed air defense cooperation agreements with Qatar and the United Arab Emirates Saturday after signing a similar deal with Saudi Arabia during his visit to the kingdom Thursday.
What the fuck is this guy doing?
Ukraine has sent anti-drone experts to all 3 Gulf countries, as Iran has been targeting infrastructure in the region using drones similar to ones used by Russia against Ukraine. On Sunday, Zelensky also visited Jordan for security talks. An Israeli strike targeted a marked press car in southern Lebanon Saturday, killing Ali Shoaib of Al-Manar TV, reporter Fatima Fatouni of Al-Mayadeen TV, and her brother, freelance cameraman Mohammed Fatouni. Israel's military said it targeted Shoaib, accusing him of being a Hezbollah intelligence operative without providing evidence. Israel made no mention of the 2 other journalists killed. Protesters gathered in Martyrs Square in Beirut Saturday, holding photos of the dead journalists killed in the Israeli airstrike.
They just killed
the important thing we all want to draw attention to is that the Israeli enemy, once they find anyone standing for rights and supporting the oppressed, tries to silence that voice. And the voice of the oppressed cannot be stopped, despite the enemy trying to overpower it, or no matter how many killings they carry out.
Lebanon's information minister said the government would file a complaint with the UN Security Council over what he called Israel's deliberate and blatant war. Israeli strike targeted a marked press car in southern Lebanon Saturday, killing Ali Shoaib of Al-Manar TV. infrastructure in the region using drones similar to ones used by Russia against Ukraine. On Sunday, Zelensky also visited Jordan for security talks. An Israeli strike targeted a marked press car in southern Lebanon Saturday, killing Ali Shoaib of Al-Manar TV, reporter Fatima Fatouni of Al-Mayadeen TV, and her brother, freelance cameraman Mohammed Fatouni. Israel's military said it targeted Shoaib, accusing him of being a Hezbollah intelligence operative without providing evidence. Israel made no mention of the two other journalists killed. Protesters gathered in Martyr Square.
That's what they do. They stay killing non-combatants. Civilians, journalists. How many is that? Like 200? That's their game plan. That's what they do. No consequences for their fuckery.
Beirut Saturday, holding photos of the dead journalists killed in the Israeli airstrike.
The important thing we all want to draw attention to is that the Israeli enemy, once they find anyone standing for rights and supporting the oppressed, tries to silence that voice. And the voice of the oppressed cannot be stopped, despite the enemy trying to overpower it, or no matter how many killings they carry out.
Lebanon's information minister said the government would file a complaint with the UN Security Council over what he called Israel's deliberate and blatant war crime against the media, unquote. Meanwhile, the UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, UNIFIL, said a peacekeeper was killed Sunday when a projectile exploded at one of its positions in southern Lebanon. Another peacekeeper was critically injured. On Saturday, the World Health Organization said 9 paramedics were killed in 5 separate Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon, bringing the total number of health workers killed by Israel in March to 51. The attacks come as Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered the Israeli military to further expand the security buffer zone in southern Lebanon. The United Nations says Israeli strikes and evacuation orders in Lebanon have displaced more than 370,000 children. More than 120 children have been killed and nearly 400 have been injured in Israeli attacks this month. In Gaza, Israeli airstrikes on 2 checkpoints in Khan Yunis killed at least 6 Palestinians, including a child Sunday, according to local health officials. The Israeli military has killed over 680 Palestinians in Gaza since a U.S.-brokered ceasefire with Hamas came into effect last November. This is the mother of Samar al-Faisis, who was killed in Israeli airstrikes on Sunday.
This is the 4th martyr. I do not have any sons left. No sons are left. That's enough. That's enough. 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 What is the fault of this woman? What is the fault of this child? This child, 2.5 years old and orphaned? There is a fetus in her womb who will enter the world without a father.
Israeli police prevented Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, from entering the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Palm Sunday to celebrate Mass, due to Israel's ban on gatherings at religious sites during the Iran war. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said Iranian missiles had repeatedly targeted Jerusalem's holy sites, with missile fragments landing near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Latin Patriarchate said it was the first time in centuries the heads of the church were prevented from celebrating Palm Sunday Mass at the site, calling the incident a grave precedent. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas called it a violation of religious freedom. Following the backlash, Prime Minister Netanyahu said the Latin Patriarch would receive full and immediate access to the church. Pope Leo has reprimanded U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for using Christian scripture to justify waging war and slaughtering people. During a Palm Sunday Mass in St. Peter's Square, the Pope said God refuses the prayers of leaders who have hands full of blood. Meanwhile, leaders of the Democratic Women's Caucus and Congressional Black Caucus have condemned Hegseth for personally intervening to block the promotion of 4 Army officers to become 1-star generals. 2 of the 4 denied promotions are black, 2 are women. The remaining officers on track for promotions are overwhelmingly white men.
Oh, shocker.
A New Jersey man has been arrested and charged with plotting to firebomb the home of a prominent Palestinian-American activist in Brooklyn. Alexander Heifler is accused of assembling Molotov cocktails and planning an arson attack against Nardine Kiswani, the co-founder of Within Our Lifetime. Kiswani has led protests in support of Palestinians and against Israel's assault on the Gaza Strip. Investigators say Heifler is a member of the Jewish Defense League, a pro-Israel group designated as a terrorist group by the FBI. He allegedly planned to flee to Israel after launching the attack. We'll speak with Nardine Kiswani later in the broadcast.
Oh, shit,
President Trump Sunday bragged to reporters his planned White House ballroom is, quote, ahead of schedule and under budget, unquote. He also described the ballroom as a shed for a massive military complex being built underneath. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has sued the Trump administration, alleging the ballroom construction ignored required reviews and public input. Bank of America has agreed to pay more than $72 million to settle a federal lawsuit brought by hundreds of survivors of rape and sexual abuse by the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Survivors filed the lawsuit last October, alleging Bank of America overlooked clear signs Epstein was using a pair of bank accounts to carry out crimes. The suit claimed Bank of America had, quote, a plethora of information regarding Epstein's sex trafficking operation, but chose profit over protecting the victims.
Isn't that crazy?
Unquote.
A bank
It's the third settlement of its
involved.
kind after Deutsche Bank and J.P. Morgan Chase paid out a combined $365 million to settle lawsuits brought by Epstein's survivors. The shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security is now the longest shutdown of any federal agency in U.S. history. On Friday, a record number of TSA workers called out of work. Since the shutdown began, more than 500 TSA officers have quit. Last week, the House passed its own short-term bill to fund the entire Department of Homeland Security after the Senate passed a bill excluding funding for ICE and Border Patrol. The House bill now heads to the Senate, which is currently in a 2-week recess.
They want to get rid of TSA and just
And
put
here in New York, Senator Bernie Sanders rallied support Sunday for a proposed income tax increase on New Yorkers earning over $1 million a year. The tax would impose a 2% increase on New York City's wealthiest residents, helping to close the looming budget deficit as Mayor Mamdani seeks to establish universal free early child care, free bus rides, and more affordable housing. This is Senator Sanders speaking at a rally at Lehman College.
The people of this city, the people of this state, the people of this country do not want to see our kids go hungry, do not want to see people sleep out on the street, lack health care. They want the very rich to start paying their fair share of taxes.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to
What? This guy, bro. This is probably gonna be loud, huh? Ernie, we'll go here.
Since we last spoke, which has actually been a while. R.I.P. Tuesday. The world is now facing the worst fuel shortages since COVID. We were warned. Everyone is so focused on Iran that hardly anyone is talking about what Israel is doing in Lebanon. We got Jack Reacher in real life beating up his neighbor, and there's actually some updates to that. OpenAI came out and refused to continue making slop, and they abruptly shut down Sora. So goodbye, gay Jake Paul.
I'm gay.
Which Alex weirdly loved so much. We probably need to talk about that one day. The UK just scrapped short-term prison sentences in one of the biggest change to jail terms in decades. And I have some tragic news. There will not be a Saturday video as well. There will be something else instead. We'll talk about that at the end. We're going to be talking about all of that and so much more. So let's stop the yapping. And for the only time you're going to hear it this week. And let's go!
I wish she would do an everyday video. What are the world fuel shortages? Okay, we'll watch this. We'll watch this. We'll watch this. Dog self-rescue. What? UK prisons? Nope. AI data centers versus farms? Fuck it. Amputee charged with murder? No. Well, yeah, sure. Jack Reacher is innocent. Okay.
Philippines just became the first country in the entire world to declare a state of emergency because of the fuel shortages linked to the war. This is because a staggering 98% of the fuel that the Philippines imports needs to pass through the Gulf region. Should have damn diversified. And as a result, the price of diesel and petrol in the country has more than doubled in a matter of weeks. Daddy, just imagine your fuel bill, $50. Now it's $100. That's close to unaffordable. And here's the thing, we're not only laughing at we're not laughing at the Philippines at all, but if we were gonna say, hi, you should have diversified, well, guess what? It's not even that. Everyone is suffering. The whole world is now facing its biggest fuel restrictions since COVID. Slovenia just became the first EU state to begin fuel rationing, so now you're only allowed to buy a maximum of 50 liters per day. Meanwhile, the IEA has advised their 32 member countries, which includes like so many: Australia, Germany, France, Japan, the UK, the United States, but we'll talk about them in a second because they're a little bit segregated in these regards. And the IEA urged these member countries to implement various fuel-saving measures, including, and this one I thought was the craziest, which is why I'm telling you about it, lowering the highway speed limit by 10 kilometers per hour. So they got a whole they got a whole list of, fuel-saving measures that they usually implement in times of emergency, and this is one of them. Imagine that. Now you're only allowed to drive this speed. China's affected too. They've temporarily banned fuel exports to protect their domestic supply. Australia, they're facing what's being described as a national crisis. Is that true, guys? You facing a national crisis?
I just don't believe that China is gonna struggle. I know they have a ton of reserves, like a lot, but I think they got, things up their sleeve to just come on top, really. I don't see another way.
Well, apparently hundreds of their petrol stations are running dry from panic buying and shortages. Keep in mind, there are thousands, so hundreds running dry is not that crazy, but it's still pretty crazy. They even briefly debated setting a $40 buying limit. They did reject that, but the fact that they had to debate it, it's pretty significant. South Korea, they're considering working from home policies. I mean, we spoke about all those different countries in the previous video. So remember all of those different countries in the previous video that had fuel restrictions? Well, just imagine that on top of these, because we're not going through them again. South Korea, working from home policies. And they've also set price limits for fuel for the first time in decades. And that also includes other countries, including Croatia, Hungary, Brazil, Thailand. I mean, Cuba, they're really struggling this week. In fact, they had numerous power outages, like countrywide. And this is only being made worse by oil shortages because they had their own huge problems before the war kicked off. Pakistan, they've closed schools for 2 weeks because of it. And Japan, actually, they will begin their biggest ever release of oil from their strategic reserves this week. Now, as for
I don't understand why these countries who are going to suffer, why aren't they pushing the U.S. to stop this? Or why aren't they making deals with Iran? What's happening? They should, I know I'm in the U.S., but they should just skip talking to the U.S. or Trump or whoever's in charge. They should just go straight to Iran and make deals, because that'll teach this dumbass administration not to fuck with somebody who actually has power. And a lot of people said this would happen. I don't understand what he thought was going to happen.
US, while the whole world is kind of feeling the pain, when Trump, in fact, was asked about the Strait of Hormuz, he said this.
But all you need is a few people dropping mines here and there, and, you louse it up. So we need, I'm demanding that these countries come in and protect their own territory, because it is their territory. It's the place from which they get their energy. And they should come and they should help us protect it. You could make the case that maybe we shouldn't even be there at all, because we don't need it. We have a lot of oil. We're the #1 producer anywhere in the world times 2.
Now, that doesn't mean that the U.S. is unaffected by this, because I have read reports that fuel in the U.S., and you guys can confirm in the comments, that's been going up. But in terms of like national emergency, state of emergency type beat, the U.S. is kind of okay on that front, which is ironic because, the U.S. and Israel are the ones that started the war, and here we are, suffering.
Exactly.
All right. Well, yeah, that's the story about that. Let's move on to more news. Moving on. Also, on a much more serious note, while the whole world is watching Iran, something serious is unfolding in Lebanon, which could have catastrophic consequences. You see, draw your eyes to this. This is Lebanon's longest river, and it cuts, as you can see, right across the country, acting as this natural barrier between the north of the country and that bottom south portion, which is right against Israel.
Parasites.
And speaking of, Israel recently made a pretty stunning announcement. They warned all civilians in Lebanon that south of the Litani River, which is that portion right there at the bottom, to evacuate their homes and move north. This is because they ordered the destruction of all bridges across this river. Technically, they didn't say all, but they ordered the destruction of bridges that go across this river. And they claimed that Hezbollah are using these bridges to send reinforcements and weapons to the south of the country, which is where they're predominantly having those military operations. In fact, we covered last week, remember Steve Sweeney, when he was covering his story, he was standing right by one of these bridges and covering this story when Israel dropped that bomb. Now, here's the thing. Human rights groups are seeing this and they are sounding the alarm, warning that these bridges are not just used by Hezbollah, they are civilian bridges too. In fact, predominantly civilian bridges, and destroying them, they say, risks isolating any remaining Lebanese citizens that are in the south, which aid workers that are there estimate to still be in the hundreds of thousands. Now, it goes without saying, but without these bridges, fleeing military conflict, which we'll get to in a second, becomes a lot more difficult. And also access to essentials like aid, fuel, food, that could be completely disrupted in some areas, but in other areas slowed. But here's the thing, the bridges is not the full story here. It actually gets a lot more significant because Israel have now announced that they are expanding their ground operations, their invasion into southern Lebanon, warning that this will be a prolonged operation. In fact, as we spoke about 2 videos ago, earlier this month, they had a military proposal that was presented to the government to call up 450,000 reservists for this operation. Now, as of recording, it is still not approved or denied, but if it is soon approved, then it would become Israel's largest ground invasion into Lebanon in 20 years. A senior Israeli official told Axios that we're going to be doing what we did in Gaza, referring to the flattening of those buildings, which they say that Hezbollah are using to store weapons and launch attacks from. I mean, for comparison, if they did do that, well, UN satellite analysis, they suggest that approximately 81% of all structures on the Gaza Strip are damaged. So if they do that to the southern portion of Lebanon, we could be witnessing something truly, truly serious in the coming months. And then, on top of all of that, yesterday, Israel's finance minister suggested that this conflict needs to end in radical change. Now, this radical change that he was suggesting is saying that Israel's new border with Lebanon should be moved all the way up to the Litani River. Yeah, so as I said, not a lot of people are talking about this one because everyone is focused on what is going on in Iran. So thought that I needed a bit of coverage. That being said, move on. Also, since we last spoke, Sora is being shut down by OpenAI. I mean, they just released, which is pretty crazy. And for anyone that doesn't know what Sora is, look, there's just no hope at this point. I'm not going to waste everyone's time by repeating things you should already know. Anyway, sorry about the outburst. OpenAI, they just abruptly announced that they are no longer going to pursue this app. Just you wait to hear the reason why, because maybe this is the start of a big shift in the AI industry. Because remember that OpenAI is arguably one of the leaders and the OGs in the industry. So if they do something significant, will others follow? They told the BBC that the company wishes to focus on other development projects, such as robotics that will, quote, help people solve real-world problems and physical tasks. And while they say they will still offer the image generation through ChatGPT, they want to move away from video generative tools. Generative, okay? No, I didn't. Now that is really interesting because Sora arguably had the most backlash amongst the public saying, really? Really? This is what we're going to use AI for, huh? To create slop? Really? So it almost feels as if, and obviously they're not saying this verbatim, but it feels as if they're like, yeah, actually low-key, let's focus on using AI.
You give really powerful tools to a society of stupid people, that's what you get. You get no progression. No, you get slop. You get stupidity. You get work that reflects that society. We are the dumbest fucking society that has ever existed. Including me.
And developing AI to solve real-world problems, not to entertain the masses with slop. One of the major points they received a lot of criticism for was using likenesses of individuals who have already passed away. And so their families came out and said, like, how dare you? Like Morgan Freeman, the Robin Williams family, they came out. In fact, last year, Sora actually had to ban deepfakes of Martin Luther King because his family complained as well. So you got to wonder, is it, because they actually want to use AI to create something useful with meaning, or were they just trying to avoid the nightmare of IP and copyright and that sort of thing? I don't know. But either way, they gave up a lot of money for it because this also ended their $1 billion deal with Disney, which would have been, them using Disney characters for ChatGPT and Sora. And, that didn't come from Disney ending it. It actually came from OpenAI. So they did put their money where their mouth is. But guess what? Disney was not like, yeah, you know what, fair enough. They just basically said, we'll find someone else. And there's plenty of them. So, even if OpenAI goes this direction, there's going to be plenty of others that are willing to fill that space. That's the free market. But the question is, what do you think? Do you think that it's a noble thing for ChatGPT to say, nah, we're not in the slop game anymore? That sounded horrendous. Or do you think they should have just stuck with it? Because even if they leave it, someone else will fill the void. Let me know your thoughts. But for now, moving on. Also, you need to hear this story today because this pack of 7 kidnapped dogs, they just pulled off one of the greatest escapes in canine history. Disney, speaking about you better be taking notes right now, because if I don't see a movie generated in AI, there are certain moments when you realize that you are the problem. This was one of them. So, let me get to it. Earlier this month, these dogs were stolen from their homes in a rural village in China. How dare you, first of all?
How dare you?
Second of all, it gets worse because they were actually on their way to a meat market. All right, well, Disney is known for having some pretty dark backstories, so with some of their movies, that's definitely right up their alley. But good story is there's a twist. They managed to free themselves from the back of this truck as they were heading there. And despite there being a German Shepherd in this pack,
no pun intended,
it was the Corgi that was leading it. I believe a Corgi was from Britain, isn't it?
The Queen's dog.
Britannia. The Queen's dogs, I hear a voice in my ear saying.
The Queen's dog.
Now there's no Queen. Well, point is, German Shepherd or the Queen's Corgi? Clearly the Queen's Corgi is out there. We'll call that one Michael Schofield because they escaped. But that's not even the crazy spot, because think about it. When they escaped, they didn't run their separate directions. They all stuck together. Come on! How is this not a Disney movie? And they trekked over 10 miles all the way back to their home village. They went through busy highways and all sorts of terrain, but they never left a single one behind. It was the friends that we made along the way. Story arc. And guess what? Some pedestrians even tried to help these dogs, but they ignored them. I wonder why. We just got stolen by pedestrians and strangers. We're never trusting humans again, apart from our owners, which they're really making a long journey back to. Point is, we have since heard that they are all back, all 7 of them, back with their families, safely at home. The kidnappers, still out on the loose. So if Disney does want to incorporate a revenge arc, I'm okay with that, but just do it well. Anyway, that was a bit of a wild one. Moving on. Also, speaking about the UK and the Brits, well, guess what? This week, they made some pretty significant changes to their jail term. So significant,
sounds crazy.
It's decades significant. So as of this week, they will actually be scrapping most of their same amount. How, you ask? Well, a family from Kentucky, they've just rejected same. So cost we'll only be able to know in a couple of years. Who will see. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, but for now, moving on. Also, cast your eyes upon these 2 houses because they are worth the exact same amount. How, you ask? Well, a family from Kentucky, they've just rejected $26 million for their house and a part of their land to build an AI data center.
Holy shit.
26 million! God damn!
If it's my way, I'll stay and hold and feed a nation. 26 million doesn't mean anything.
Now, they rejected this despite this unnamed mega corporation, which can represent a number of different AI companies. So we don't know which AI company wants to, put their little data center there. But
that is a
this
lot
is
of money.
At least 10 times what this.
That is a lot of money. I don't know if they're just, are they good people? Do they have that type of money? Or maybe not. I know it says 10 times, but do they come from a wealthy background? Like, that is a lot of money. A lot.
House in this land
better
is
than I
actually
am.
worth. So they certainly won't get a deal like this anytime soon. But guess what? They don't want a deal because this farm has been handed down from generation to generation. And it's not just the house. They say that, you know, them providing and making food is their moral duty to make this food for America.
My grandfather and great-grandfather and a whole bunch of family has all lived here for years, paid taxes on it, fed a nation off of it, even raised wheat through the Depression and kept bread lines up in the United States of America.
And when the owners were asked by news outlets about the potential jobs and economic growth that this AI company is promising it will bring the area, they said this.
I say they're a liar and the truth ain't in them, is what I say. It's a scam. They call us old stupid farmers, you know, but we're not. We know whenever our food is disappearing, our lands are disappearing, and we don't have any water and poison, we know we've had it.
Now, it doesn't mean that the AI data center will not be built because, shock, they've just gone to someone else and then offered them a lot of money. And so that's all, they'll just do that there. It's kind of like the Sora example that we gave earlier. But the AI data center will go forward. The big question is, what do you think? Do you think that this family is a bunch of American heroes that need to be celebrated, or they should have just got the bag and retired? Let me know your thoughts. But for now, moving on. Also this week, I don't know how to put it to you guys. The news is getting weird. That's probably the best way to start this. A quadruple amputee has just been arrested for allegedly shooting and killing someone. Dayton Weber is a 27-year-old who has had both of his arms and legs amputated when he was just 10 months old after contracting severe bacterial infections. But here's the thing, despite his disability, he did not let that hold him back in life. In fact, he's done a lot and he made quite a big name for himself. He made history to become the first quadruple amputee to compete in a professional televised cornhole league. He was once described by ESPN as a promising wrestler and football player. And you know, all of the things that he's done, he served as an inspiration for people with disabilities similar to his. But guess what? All of that inspiration, it might be over because we don't want to... You'll see. Yesterday, the Charles County Sheriff's Office released a detailed statement about his arrest on suspicion for murder. Brace yourself, it's pretty wild. So Dayton was reportedly with a group of friends in his car when he got into this heated argument. And he allegedly shot and killed the front passenger seat individual, who was also a 27-year-old male. Dayton was also the driver, according to his friends in the back seat, which are now eyewitnesses. And they are claiming that after Dayton put them through this traumatic experience, he tried to get them to help him remove the body. Of course, they refused. They left the car and the scene, and then Dayton was later arrested. The victim's body was found in someone's yard. He now faces charges of first and second degree murder, and I don't think they literally meant you can do anything you set your mind to. That's just more of a motivational phrase. Moving on. And then lastly, I'm sure you've heard about it or seen it by now, but we got Jack Reacher in real life.
Okay,
Alan, he really is. He's not playing the character, bro. Is the character. Now, initially, when everyone was hearing this story, it just looked like, from the video alone that we had, it looked like Alan Richardson was just beating the crap out of his neighbor, and it was like, this is assault. But since then, TMZ, which they half published this. I don't know if they had the information at the same time or whether they published it, created that story, and then published the rest of it. But both of it comes from TMZ. And so the initial one was, yeah, as you've probably seen, him looking like he's beating up that guy in the blue, which, that's real. He is doing that. And according to the neighbor's version of events, he claimed that Alan was on his bike more than one occasion, speeding up and down and causing a disturbance. And then he said that he finally snapped and he flipped Alan off, and then he said, "Can you effing stop this, please?" And that's when he claimed that Alan got off his bike and then just started beating the crap out of him. Well, guess what? Alan was wearing body cam. Now, from this footage, we can see that the neighbor jumped in front of Alan, causing him to crash and obviously threaten his safety. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. Also, important to note that his kids were right behind him on bikes of their own, so it could have threatened their safety as well. Now, Alan did push Taylor over and they exchanged a bit of words, but that seemed like it was it to start off with. Now, Alan tried to leave on his bike and the neighbor kept on shouting at him over and over again and refused to move out of the way. And then it caused Alan to seemingly fall off his bike once again. And that's when he got up and yeah, you know the rest. Alex, News Maddie said that she's got something to add, so play this clip because people apparently, love this so much?
Well, they love the
something about cake pops.
On the series.
So they're on Alan's side?
Yeah, so they
okay.
made a trailer intro for him
Okay.
In a quiet neighborhood, one man saw a motorcycle and still chose chaos. Look at the motorcycle. One terrible decision, which should have been an apology, became a neighborhood event.
What are you gonna do? You've been driving around my neighborhood like a lunatic! Hit me, you piece of shit!
Gladly. This summer, don't be a little bit.
Okay, so point is, no matter which side you're on, the most important here is what side the police is on. They told Entertainment Weekly, after reviewing the available evidence, including video footage and 2 witness statements, authorities have determined that there will be no criminal charges, and Mr. Richardson's actions were found to be in self-defense. Alan has since posted a bit of a cryptic message on his Instagram, and it reads, "Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake." Thad Castle? That's what we know you as. But I mean, ultimately, in serious terms, who the hell is picking the fight with literal Jack Reacher? Crazy. Now, as for my last ending notes, there will not be a Saturday video. We are working on something very, very significant. In fact, one of the most significant things to happen in 3 years, and that is dropping on Saturday. I cannot wait for you guys to finally hear about this. You know how many years I've been keeping this inside of me, this secret? Well, it's all coming out on Saturday. Unlike, well, much like Jake Paul on Sora.
3, 2, 1. I'm gay.
So make sure you put on post notifications because the video dropping on Saturday is big. I will get back to working on everything else. I love you guys. Thank you for always watching, liking, subbing. You mean the world to me. And I will see you. Actually, cue the best outro song in the world. Let's stop the yapping and let's get...
Iran said on Sunday that it was ready to respond to a ground attack. That's as it accused the US of preparing a land assault even as it sought negotiations.
Is the volume so low?
In a message to the nation, Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf, said that as long as the Americans seek Iran's surrender, our response is that we will never accept humiliation. Washington has dispatched thousands of Marines to the Middle East. The first 2 contingents arrived on Friday, the US military said, aboard an amphibious assault ship. The Washington Post quoted US officials. Iran said on Sunday that it was ready to respond to a ground attack. That's as it accused the US of preparing a land assault even as it sought negotiations. In a message to the nation, Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf, said that as long as the Americans seek Iran's surrender, our response is that we will never accept humiliation. Washington has dispatched thousands of Marines to the Middle East. The first 2 contingents arrived on Friday, the US military said, aboard an amphibious assault ship. The Washington Post quoted US officials as saying the Pentagon was preparing for weeks of ground operations in Iran, though whether President Donald Trump would approve such a deployment remained uncertain. Meanwhile, talks were being held in Pakistan in a bid to end the fighting that has killed thousands of people and caused the biggest ever disruption to global energy supplies. That's after, on Saturday, Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis launched their first attacks on Israel since the start of the conflict. Those strikes point to a potential new threat to global shipping. During the Gaza war, the Houthis hit ships in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a critical maritime choke point leading to the Suez Canal. Analysts say renewed attacks there would pile further pressure on the world economy.
Bro, the mess that's happening in those waters.
While Israel's military has also continued its relentless air assault on Iran. On Sunday, Israel said its forces had targeted Tehran's weapons manufacturing industry, including dozens of storage and production sites the day before. It also continued to hit targets in Lebanon as part of its campaign against Hezbollah. That included killing 3 Lebanese journalists in a strike on a media vehicle, Lebanon's El Manar TV reported, as well as a Lebanese soldier. Israel's military said one of the journalists had been part of a Hezbollah intelligence unit.
Let's bring in MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid out of Dubai, Washington Post Pentagon reporter Dan Lamoth, and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Peter Mansour. Inzamam, after suggesting Iran was playing ball, now President Trump is threatening specific infrastructure sites. He also claims the U.S. is negotiating with a new regime. Who is he referring to, and where do the talks stand?
Well, look, it's difficult to give an answer to exactly who the US is talking directly to. President Trump said it was a new and more reasonable regime inside Iran that the US is having discussions with, but there is no clear sign of exactly who that is, and in fact, whether those conversations are taking place. Secretary Rubio this morning also saying in an interview that he couldn't declare who those people are because of sensitivities. My take is that it could potentially be the parliamentary leader inside Iran, Mohammad Ghalibaf. This is someone who has directed a lot of his anger and hatred, particularly towards Israel, using social media, not as much to the US. And that may give an indication that he could be someone who is having these conversations. But what we do know is that the US and Iran have been talking via Pakistan. We know the US passed on this 15-point peace plan last week, and Iran did respond via Pakistan as well. But there doesn't seem to be conversations directly happening, and that's what Iran has come out today and said once again. They're denying all talks and are taking place, and have actually said that the US demands are unrealistic, illogical, and excessive. In a statement shared with MS Now, a spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry said that US officials say whatever they want. We have not had any negotiations with the US. What was there was a request for negotiations from the US that was sent to us by some countries. We do not evaluate these claims honestly. We have experienced past experiences with flesh and blood, a betrayal that was committed twice during negotiations. And that betrayal is something that even the president had spoken about on Air Force One yesterday. He said that you never know with Iran. We negotiate with them, and then we always have to blow them up. So whilst these talks seem to be going on, or they seem to be going on in the president's eyes, we are still seeing destruction, a lot of fighting, a lot of threats towards energy infrastructure by the president in this statement today as well, specifically talking about energy infrastructure, desalination plants as well. We know that if the US specifically target those sites, they could have huge impact on the people inside Iran. We know that Israel has already targeted some of those sites already, and then we would see an Iranian response on similar sites across the Gulf, like this one behind me, Jebel Ali desalination plant, but also a huge port here as well. So if those attacks do go ahead by the US and Israel, we would expect the response to be strong too, Anna.
And Dan, I mentioned it at the top, but take us through your reporting on the Pentagon's plans for potential ground operations. What kind of missions are they preparing for?
I think there's a range of options on the table. There's been a lot of discussion of what do these Marines do as they've now begun to arrive in the region. That could be something with Kark Island, the major oil export hub. That could be something along the coast, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz. There's a lot of discussion of what does the United States need to do to try and make that waterway safe. It wouldn't be a surprise to me at this point to see perhaps raids along the coast as they're looking for weapons caches and other things that pose a threat to shipping.
Colonel Mansour, I mean, realistically, could we really just see targeted operations? Dan's reporting, using special ops, some infantry as well, as opposed to a full-scale invasion. What's the distinction?
The targeted operations will not open the Strait of Hormuz nor keep it open. To do that, you're going to have to seize both sides of the strait. That includes islands that are in the Gulf, potentially points along the Iranian coastline, but maybe not. If you can take the islands and fortify them and put air defenses on those islands, then you could potentially open the strait once you clear the mines that have been laid by Iran. But, we love to hear about these targeted special forces operations because they're quick, they're clean, they don't have permanent boots on the ground. But in this case, they're not going to get the job done.
Iran's parliament speaker was
quoted you think
as...
they're just going to sit and take it? Look what they've been doing. You think they're just going to not bomb the fuck out of anybody who's there? Same thing if they take Kark.
Saying the enemy is openly sending a message of negotiation and secretly planning a ground attack, adding that Iran would set U.S. troops on fire. And by the way, this is supposedly one of the potential negotiators the U.S. would be dealing with. Colonel, if President Trump were to send American soldiers into the fray, what kind of resistance would they face?
As much as Iran can put up. It'll mean ground fighting with whatever troops are in the area. Those troops on the ground will become targets for all the drones and missiles that Iran can launch at them. And I'm afraid there will be casualties. So I'm sure the military is planning to defend whatever troops it puts in harm's way with various assets, but this will be an escalation of the conflict.
Also, even getting to, even landing, flying over, where are they going to come through? Where are they going to come through where they're not going to get shot at? You know what I mean? They're going to have like a D-Day style entrance. It's like, imagine just sending soldiers to die. Bro, this guy sucks.
Sure.
Dan, in terms of timeline, I mean, the president put 4 to 6 weeks as the marker at the beginning of the military action. If these troops are sent in, if there are now boots on the ground, is that going to extend this timeline?
I think it becomes increasingly unpredictable how long this could drag out. Even if they have a plan where it's, for the sake of argument, 2 to 3 weeks of limited operations, trying to clean out threats, things of that sort. When you start getting bogged down, would they need to bring in additional personnel later? What would they do to fortify? How good are the air defenses? I think there's a lot of open questions that make it really hard to say, oh, yeah, we'll just declare victory 2 weeks from now, and perhaps nothing has really fundamentally changed.
Yeah, and the president has moved the goalposts recently on this war, from stopping a nuclear program that he claimed to have obliterated last summer to now focusing on some sort of oil takeover.
Bro, Iran has like 1 million plus ready soldiers to go. Unless the U.S. is planning to use, like, I don't know, bigger bombs. I don't know how we win this. Just sending in your boys to fucking get slaughtered. It's crazy to me, man, to be honest. It's just...
Dan, in the course of your reporting, have you observed how these pivots from the president actually affect how the Pentagon game plans this fight?
I think it becomes unpredictable what he will actually approve. Some of these plans actually well predate this conflict, weeks, months, years in some cases. There has been a discussion over the years of if they had to take Karg Island, how would they do it? That's the kind of thing that gets war gamed. Some of that, there's even open discussion of past war games on that issue. But in this circumstance, in this situation, with this particular threat, what that looks like at this moment, they need to adjust as they go. And that really presents additional challenges for the commanders and the actual personnel that would have to carry out the mission.
Colonel, the president told the Financial Times that the U.S. could take Iran's critical Karg Island very easily. Now, we've had other military experts on the show say seizing Karg would make the U.S. troops essentially sitting ducks, and that Iran could simply shut down the oil pipelines. They believe this would be a total ineffective strategy. What are your thoughts on any Karg Island plans?
The president is enamored with seizing an economically important target and thinking that that will end the war by forcing Iran to negotiate. It will not. This is a regime that is ideological in nature. You can shut down 100% of its oil exports and it will take the pain and keep on fighting. You also, to get to Karg Island, looking at the operational picture here, you got to sail all the way up the Gulf. Making whatever fleet that does that a target for all the drones and missiles in the area. So it's not a given that we can get to Karg Island with a naval force. And if you try to get there with airborne troops or Osprey helicopters / planes, then they become targets as well. And then once the troops are on the ground, again, they'll be targeted by Iranian forces. So, the president might be enamored with holding Karg Island hostage. I don't think it's going to work for him strategically or diplomatically.
In Zamam, the region was completely rocked by attacks over the weekend. We outlined some of those at the top, but now Iran has set a new deadline of its own to attack U.S. and Israeli universities today. This is according to a statement published by Iranian state media. What should we make of this new ultimatum? Are they taking a page out of Trump's playbook?
Yeah, perhaps, but it's not really been the greatest playbook, has it, by the president? I think many analysts would probably agree with that. And Iran, you've got to remember, has the upper hand here, Anna, because they have control of the Strait of Hormuz, and that's having a crippling effect on the world's economy. So look, when Iran says that they specifically are going to target a place, and it usually happens in retaliation to some US or Israeli strikes inside Iran, we've heard huge bombardments over the last 4 days. I was on the phone to an ambassador last night inside Tehran, and in the background you could hear all the bombing, the explosions taking place. Then Iran usually announces that they're going to target specific areas, usually in the Gulf, and they usually follow through with that. We haven't heard anything about targeting universities today as of yet, but it is something that they announced, tried to get in the front foot by making this sort of announcement to target universities, particularly US universities. And now, as a result, we're seeing education happening at home in the likes of the UAE and other parts of the Gulf as well. But clearly, this is all in retaliation to an increase in Israeli strikes into Iran, which has really ramped up over the last few days. And as a result, the strikes inside the Gulf have also ramped up over the last few days as well. They are now here calling for an end to this conflict. They want to see the US and Israel essentially finish the job inside Iran. They are saying that that should be a complete regime change. They're probably right now not happy with the fact that President Trump has announced that we are talking to a new regime, because the likes of the UAE and Gulf countries probably don't see that that is the case.
I mean, it's just bad all around, bro. We're so fucking cooked.